All right, what's going on, guys? Farzin Vasugian here with you for another episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast, back to back, just like the Chiefs, except we're doing this back to back days, not back to back years, back to back days, nonetheless. Episodes of the Chiefs Zone podcast. Happy Wednesday to all of you. It is a little bit late on a Wednesday, so for those of you who are on the East Coast, and tuning in to the Chiefs Zone live. Appreciate you guys. It's a little late there. I know some of you guys probably have to get up early for work on a Thursday, but nonetheless, I appreciate all of you guys tuning in live on Facebook and on YouTube. And for those of you listening to the archive version on Apple, Spotify, any place where you can download a podcast, I appreciate all of you guys as well. Not a very long podcast, but a lot of things to get into here on tonight's episode. A little bit of an update on the L'Jarius Sneed front. What's going on with L'Jarius Sneed? Who's interested in Sneed? What are the odds that we see something happen, whether the Chiefs re-sign him or the Chiefs trade him? I'll get into that later on. A lot to get into with that one. We have a little bit of an update on Jaylen Watson. I've been saying some things about Jaylen Watson and how I felt like he took a bit of a step back in his second season in the NFL, and there's actually a reason for that. We'll get into that shortly as well. I'm going to go out of bounds as well because the Buffalo Bills had quite the day today. Let's just say, have you guys seen the movie The Purge? There was a purge in Buffalo. Oh boy. In Orchard Park, there was a big purge. A lot of players released in Buffalo. Might be one of the busier days we've seen for an NFL team, even before the new league year begins. How does that impact Kansas City? I'll tell you exactly why. All of that and more here on this episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast. Real quickly, I want to let you know this podcast is brought to you by SeatGeek. If you guys have never purchased from SeatGeek before, I got a little gift for you. You can use my promo code Farzin and you will save $20 off your first purchase from SeatGeek. We got college basketball. It's still going on right now. The NBA, the NHL, baseball season starting up real soon. And maybe you guys want to wait on that $20 free gift for the NFL season. That works as well. You can use it on MMA events, WWE concerts. Use my promo code Farzin and new customers can save $20 off their first purchase from SeatGeek. Go to SeatGeek.com. Use my promo code Farzin if you're a first-time customer, and you will save $20 off your first purchase. All right. I see a lot of you guys tuning into the live chat on a late Wednesday. I appreciate all of you guys. Let's get right into it because we've got a little bit of an update on the L'Jarius Sneed front here. As I mentioned earlier, USA Today reported on Wednesday early afternoon that 7 teams are interested in L'Jarius Sneed. The Vikings, the Colts, the Titans, the Patriots, Lions, Falcons, and Jaguars. Now, you'll notice the Dolphins are not on that list. We heard over the weekend, there was a report over the weekend that the Miami Dolphins had some interest in L'Jarius Sneed, but this report from USA Today mentioned 7 teams interested in Sneed, and the Dolphins are not one of those 7 teams. So instead, we have, once again, I'll read the list again: Vikings, Colts, Titans, Patriots, Lions, Falcons, and Jaguars. Let's go over each of those teams, and I'll probably spend more time on other teams. But let's start with the Patriots because that's the enticing one right there. The Patriots are the worst team of the bunch. They have the number 3 pick in the draft. If you have the number 3 pick in this year's draft, guess who you're going to get? There's a very good chance you'll end up with Marvin Harrison Jr. And I mean, that remember in 11? Yeah, I think it was 2011. Everyone wanted their team to quote unquote suck for luck because they felt like tanking for Andrew Luck was worth it. As we know today, that unfortunately not the case because Andrew Luck had a very short career. I feel like Marvin Harrison Jr. is like the Andrew Luck of this year's draft class. Like people feel, especially the wide receiver the position, like everyone feels like he is worth getting on your team. Now, if you're the Chiefs, boy, considering what happened to your wide receivers this year, if you get Marvin Harrison Jr., that would be a massive upgrade to your offense. Now, Marvin Harrison Jr. is not the gatekeeper for all things success in the NFL, not at all. But my God, if you put him on the same team as Patrick Mahomes, Rashee Rice, and Travis Kelce, who's stopping that offense? It's fun to think about. Now, let's be realistic here. Are the Chiefs going to get the number 3 pick from New England? Not as a straight up trade. If you think the Chiefs can get the number 3 pick for L'Jarius Sneed, no way in hell that's happening straight up. The Chiefs would have to include their first round pick, which is number 32 overall. Not really that enticing considering you'd be giving up the number 3 spot. Because the Patriots, let's be honest, as awesome as L'Jarius Sneed is, you don't trade the number 3 pick in the draft for a cornerback. You need, unless you're getting let me just say this right now. I don't think the Patriots will give the number 3 pick to Kansas City unless they're getting Patrick Mahomes. And obviously, that's not happening. No way in hell that is happening. No way. So if you want the number 3 pick from New England, what are you hoping for? Here's my guess. If you are going to trade with the Patriots, and let me just quickly, because I looked up the first round, but I could see the Patriots be willing to give up their second round pick, assuming they have a second round pick. And I'm trying to look that up right now as we speak here. Yeah, they're picking number 34 in the second round. So very early in the second round. I could see the Patriots be willing to give up this year's second and next year's first or second. That might be a little too much. I could see the Chiefs getting 2 number 2s for L'Jarius Sneed. If it's the Patriots here, you'd be getting a very high second round pick. So you'd be picking last in the first round. And obviously that's assuming you don't trade that pick. And you would be picking very early in the second round. You could still find starting quality type of players with the number 34 pick. So those are your options if you have if you're going to trade with the Patriots, because I don't think the Patriots are giving up the number 3 pick unless the Chiefs make a really sweet offer and put in a package deal there. The Chiefs would essentially have to give up a few draft picks and L'Jarius Sneed if they want the New England's number 3 pick. The Colts, they have Michael Pittman Jr., who had 1,000 receiving yards this past year and in 2021. In 2022, he had 900 receiving yards, has never had more than 6 touchdown catches in a season, has had 4 touchdown grabs in the last 2 years, each of the last 2 years. Former second round pick out of USC. The Colts also have the number 15 pick in the draft. So, you know, I could see the Colts giving up the number 15 pick to Kansas City. And if you're Kansas City, you would have the number 15 pick and a number 32 pick. So you'd be picking in the middle of the draft and at the end of the draft. And that's assuming the Chiefs can keep their first round pick. Another team on this list, the Minnesota Vikings. This might be one that excites a lot of Chiefs fans here, because who do the Vikings have? Justin Jefferson. And I've said many times, I don't see Minnesota giving up Justin Jefferson. They lost Stephon Diggs. Replacing Stephon Diggs is not easy, but Minnesota's been very fortunate that they had a very good wide receiver to fill in his spot. And that guy's name is Justin Jefferson. I don't see Minnesota giving up Justin Jefferson, who they essentially got to replace Stephon Diggs, because then replacing Justin Jefferson, replacing another top tier receiver all over again, you're not going to get lucky every single time. You're just not at that spot. It's very difficult to do. So I don't know how much the Vikings would be willing to give up Justin Jefferson. As much as I know everyone in Kansas City wants him to wear that red and gold, I don't see that happening. I would, if I had to bet, like if you told me for a fact the Chiefs are trading with the Vikings, I would bet more money on the Chiefs getting the number 11 pick from the Vikings than getting Justin Jefferson. I just don't see the Vikings giving up another top tier receiver. And I can't remember if Diggs was traded or they just let him walk on to Buffalo. But again, just that's very difficult. I don't think that's happening. I think you're more likely to get the number 11 pick. When you look at the Titans, they have the number 7 pick. They also have DeAndre Hopkins. We actually just talked about that 24 hours ago on the podcast. The Falcons have the number 8 pick. So you have 3 teams that have a top 10 pick. The Patriots have the number 3 pick. The Titans have the number 7 pick, and the Falcons have the number 8 pick. That is very difficult to get a top 10 pick for a cornerback. Again, as great as L'Jarius Sneed is, I don't know if you give up a top 10 pick for a cornerback because, and again, this is not to diminish Sneed or any defensive player out there. If you're a team that's picking in the top 10, well, obviously you just had a bad season and you got to figure out some things. These are all teams that need a quarterback: the Patriots, the Titans, the Falcons. And we hear a lot about, and I feel like we hear this every year. Oh, this is a good quarterback class. This is a good wide receiver class. I feel like I hear that every year. But yeah, you when you had as bad of a season as those 3 teams had, you don't give up your top 10 pick for a cornerback. You just don't. A lot of those teams are going to be picking very high in the second round. I could maybe see the Patriots giving up the number 34 pick for L'Jarius Sneed, and I don't know if we would have other draft picks involved with that. Not exactly sure. I imagine if you're the Chiefs, you definitely want to get as much as you can for L'Jarius Sneed. I mentioned the Jaguars are also interested in L'Jarius Sneed. They're going to be picking number 17 in the draft. The Lions are going to be picking at number 29. Now, I do think L'Jarius Sneed fits the best in Detroit with Dan Campbell. I mean, I said this last night on the podcast. If you're just looking at head coaches alone, there are 2 head coaches right now. One of them is a free agent in Mike Vrabel. The other one is Dan Campbell. Those are the 2 best defensive-minded head coaches in the NFL right now. Spags is the best defensive coordinator, but in terms of just the head coaches, those 2 guys I would want to play for. But if you're the Chiefs, do you really, because the Lions are the best team of that bunch right there that's reportedly interested in Sneed. If you're the Chiefs, do you send Sneed to Detroit? Because that could be, one of the few missing pieces to the puzzle the Lions need to complete so they can make a run to the Super Bowl next season, who you could potentially face in an attempt to three-peat. Do you risk that? Sending him to New England is ideal. And I know everyone's dreaming about the number 3 pick in the draft, which I don't think there's a chance in hell you're getting that if you're the Chiefs, unless you provide a sweet package deal, which includes Sneed. And I don't know if the Chiefs are willing to give up that much for the number 3 pick, as great as Marvin Harrison Jr. might be. I just don't know at the end of the day, if you're the Chiefs, you probably don't want to do business with the Lions for obvious reasons I just mentioned. You'd probably be willing to deal with the Patriots, the Colts, the Titans, the Falcons, and no disrespect to those teams. And yeah, we do see surprises every year in the NFL, but I just don't see the Chiefs wanting to send him to the Lions, but might be more willing to send him to the Falcons, the Titans, or the Colts. One of those teams right there. Aiden has an interesting comment here. He says the Lions have other guys they want to pay first, like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sewell, plus a Goff extension. Lions won't give us their second. I don't think then they pay Sneed. My money is on Indy or Atlanta. Yeah, that's interesting too here. It's like, and again, like a team like Detroit who has a lot of great players, and they just had a very successful draft too. Just recently with all of the players they got there. So it's kind of difficult to see exactly what's going to happen here. Here's what I will say, and I don't know what's going to happen with L'Jarius Sneed, whether he resigns in Kansas City or whether he gets traded. But I will say this, do not be surprised if we don't find out for a long time. In fact, if L'Jarius Sneed is not re-signed by the draft, it would not shock me one bit if the Chiefs trade Sneed during the draft. I know player trades on draft day are not very common. And I know the big one we had a couple of years ago was Hollywood Brown when he was on the move. You don't see that often, though. I could see L'Jarius Sneed being a guy who the Chiefs move on draft day because you don't want to do anything right now. Here's what I will say. Let's just say, hypothetically speaking, the Chiefs somehow get the number 3 pick from New England. I'm telling you right now, if the Chiefs, by some miracle, get the number 3 pick, there are going to be a lot of teams, a lot of playoff contending teams who will fight like hell to get the number 2 pick, or maybe even the number 1 pick from Chicago, because they don't want Kansas City to get Marvin Harrison Jr. fall to their lap. All they need is just the 2 teams ahead of them to pick anybody but Marvin Harrison Jr. If the Chiefs get Marvin Harrison Jr. by some miracle, I mean, that I don't want to sit here and say game over because you still have games to play. Games are not won on paper, but that is not that's not an offensive defensive coordinator wants to prepare for. Not at all. Again, I don't see it happening. Aiden, listen to what I'm saying, brother. I'm saying it's going to take a miracle. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying if the Chiefs somehow get the number 3 pick, you're going to see a lot of playoff teams do everything in their power to get the number 2 or number 1 pick to prevent Kansas City from getting the Marvin Harrison Jr. Look, I don't really know what's going to happen here. I honestly thought the Chiefs would have an easier time negotiating with Sneed than Chris Jones, only because, the whole Chris Jones thing and the Katz brothers, yeah, sure, they won a Super Bowl, so maybe that, you kind of were able to smooth things over, but no, man, Chiefs fans don't forget, and I know fans are not doing contract negotiations, but when Chris Jones got his $1 million incentive right before the playoffs, his agent put out the tweet. He got $1 million, and Chiefs fans lit him up. He deleted the tweet. Michael Katz, that is. But if the Chiefs are tagging Sneed over Jones, what that tells me is they feel pretty comfortable in the spot. And you're hearing the reports again that the Chiefs are optimistic that they'll keep Chris Jones. Well, we heard all last summer that they were optimistic they would get a deal done with Jones before training camp, and we all saw how that worked out. My whole thing with these free agents right now, the Chiefs, I mean, obviously Sneed's not a free agent anymore. He's under the franchise tag, but you still have to do something with him to try to keep him. I'm kind of at a point now where I don't know what's going to happen. I really do not know. And I hate to give the 50-50 answer because that's such a cliche answer. I mean, anyone can get on a microphone and say, oh, well, I think there's a 50-50 chance they keep him or they trade him. That's like the most useless thing you can say. But I am at a point now where, you know what, man? I'm just at a point where I'll believe it when I see it because I don't really know how things are going to pan out. The Chris Jones contract negotiations have not been the easiest in the last 12, 13 months. And who knows how long that'll carry into the new league year. Hopefully the Chiefs can. I mean, listen, the new league year starts in a week. So the Chiefs better figure out something real fast. Otherwise, I think there's going to be a bidding war for Chris Jones. And I don't think it's going to take very long for Chris Jones to pick a team if a lot of teams are flashing all the money right in front of his face. Yeah, he says can't be held hostage the entire offseason. Yeah, unfortunately that was the case last year where the Chiefs were unable to do anything at the wide receiver position. I mean, you saw DeAndre Hopkins, he went on to sign somewhere. Bob says Jones is not worth the $30 million. Yeah, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money, but Chris Jones has been that difference maker. And I know what a lot of people fear. A lot of people fear, okay, he's in his 30s. If he gets that record-breaking contract, then is he going to be the same guy? Because we do see a pattern sometimes, not with every player. sometimes we do see guys who sign a big deal and they kind of vanish after that. We don't really see them play as well ever again. Yeah, that's something that comes up in my mind with Chris Jones, 100%. People have been talking about this on my Facebook page as well. Brett Veach does not tend to re-sign guys to big deals. Seriously, who has Brett Veach re-signed in recent memory and has given them a big contract not named Patrick Mahomes? I can't think of one off the top of my head. I really can't. I mean, he's let a lot of guys walk. He traded Tyreek Hill. And again, the only position that Veach is willing to spend big money on seems to be the offensive line. So, I'm kind of optimistic that he can find a way to keep Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith long-term, and you've got to do something about it because you got to protect your franchise quarterback. If you cannot protect your franchise quarterback, then having a franchise quarterback as elite as Mahomes, that's nice, but it doesn't mean much if he doesn't have an offensive line blocking for him. We saw what happened in Super Bowl 55. We don't need to get into that too much. I know people want that erased from their memories, but that is a very important day, an important lesson to this franchise that, look, as great as Mahomes is, he does need protection in order to get the football out to his receivers. Yes, the drops happen in the Super Bowl. That's another thing. But neither here nor there. Yeah, that's the thing that a lot of people are mentioning about Veach. Enrique says, surprised Jones did not fire the Katz brothers as his agents after last year. Listen, the Katz brothers are going to fight tooth and nail to get him what he wants. Here's a thing you got to realize about the Katz brothers. They don't really have a long list of clientele. I think Jody Fortson is another one of their clients. It's not a very long list, and like Chris Jones is their number one, like he's their best client, and I don't know who number two is, but there is a massive, enormous gap between number one and number two, and they want Chris Jones to get a record-breaking contract because they can put on their resume, hey, we got Chris Jones, the biggest deal for a defensive tackle ever. You want a big deal? Come hire us as your agents. That's what the Katz brothers are trying to do. And of course, when Chris Jones hears that, he's like, yeah, I want the biggest deal ever. This is Chris Jones' last chance to get a big payday in the NFL. Very likely. Yeah, I'm just reading a lot of you guys' comments. Here's the thing I will say, and I posted this on Facebook about an hour ago. Facebook and everywhere else as well. Brett Veach is not afraid to trade L'Jarius Sneed. He's just not. Understand something, okay? Last week I went over the list of guys who the Chiefs have moved on from, whether it is a guy who they cut, a guy who they just let walk, or someone they let trade. Alex Smith, Kareem Hunt, Tyreek Hill, Tyrann Mathieu, Eric Fisher, Mitchell Schwartz, Orlando Brown, D Ford, Justin Houston, Dustin Colquitt, McCole Hardman. All of those guys I mentioned have either been All-Pro or Pro Bowl players during their time in Kansas City, and they let all of them go during the Patrick Mahomes era. And again, all of them for various different reasons. Like, obviously, Alex Smith, they wanted to move on and go with Patrick Mahomes. Kareem Hunt, video surfaced, so they let him go. Tyrann Mathieu, they were maybe a little tired of his social media antics, so they wanted to move on from that. Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz, they were getting hurt a lot, so they cut those guys. Again, guys getting let go from the Chiefs for so many different reasons. My point is this. Brett Veach is not afraid to let go of some of these elite players, some of these perennial fan favorites. Like the Tyreek Hill one is a great example. That is the poster child of a massive fan favorite getting traded. And we all remember the narrative at the time. Oh, the Chiefs are screwed. No way in hell they're going to do it. It's a rebuilding year. And that did not age well at all. The whole thing about Tyreek Hill and how the Chiefs should have paid him, that resurfaced during this past regular season when the receivers were dropping everything. And even that didn't age well. I mean, at the time, it was not an incorrect take, but the fact that the Chiefs found a way to fix all of those issues and win the Super Bowl again during what was labeled as a down year, I mean, it just tells you, man, as awesome as Tyreek Hill is, the Chiefs are 7-0 in the playoffs and 2-0 in the Super Bowl without him. So trading L'Jarius Sneed is not anything Brett Veach is afraid to do. And, trust in Veach. Yeah, I'm kind of in that circle as well, where I love L'Jarius Sneed. He had a kick-ass season. I mean, the things that this guy did might be one of the best cornerback performances in Chiefs history. And we've had a lot of great cornerback play in the past. Starting with Emmett Thomas, and I think, prior to Sneed, you had Marcus Peters, who, and I know not the most popular guy, his tackling certainly was in question, but did lead the NFL in interceptions during his 3 years with the Chiefs collectively. So the Chiefs have had a lot of good cornerback play in the past, but L'Jarius Sneed, this is not someone that collected a lot of interceptions, at least not this year. And the level of play he had on display, shutting down number one receiver after number one receiver week in and week out. This guy dominated in the NFL this year. So damn well he's going to get a lot of suitors here. And you're already seeing 7 teams reportedly interested in him. Plus the Dolphins, we heard, as another team from a separate report that they're interested. So I trust Brett Veach. Again, as much as I would hate to see Sneed go, draft capital is not a bad thing for one reason. And let me just say this, because for those of you that fear losing Sneed, I kind of do. Look at the last 4 drafts the Chiefs have had. Just go look at that. It's pretty damn good. The Chiefs have drafted real well. And by the way, not to get too off topic, but I'll bring this up right now. In 2 years, we're going to have a discussion, maybe even next year too, depending on who has a 3-year contract and who has a 4-year contract. We're going to have a discussion about trying to keep Isaiah Pacheco and trying to keep Jaylen Watson, Josh Williams, Brian Cook, George Karlaftis, Trent McDuffie. I know those guys are on 4-year deals with a 5th-year option available, but man, I mean, those are guys you just drafted not too long ago, and they've all had a big hand in helping you these last 2 years go back to back. So this is a great problem to have. We never had this issue 10 years ago in Kansas City. I guarantee you the Raiders, they would love to have Kansas City's issues right now. This is a great problem to have because you've drafted so well. You realistically can't keep everyone. Seriously, who are the Raiders worried about keeping? Max Crosby? He's under contract as far as I know, and he keeps talking about next season and all. Devontae Adams. I mean, there are rumors about him reuniting with Rodgers in New York, but that's it. You're not sitting here looking at the Raiders wondering, oh no, can you keep your team intact? You need to blow up that entire roster and have a massive facelift there because that team has a lot to work on. Yeah, they beat Kansas City on Christmas. Raiders fans flexed on that for a long time until the Chiefs won a Super Bowl in their own home stadium, which, by the way, let's just be honest, that's not their own home stadium. That's Kansas City's home stadium at this point. Look, I know people do not like the idea of Sneed possibly leaving, but we've got to be open to it for one reason only. Brett Veach has drafted very well in recent years. He really has. His first couple of drafts were not that great, but since 2020, the Chiefs have drafted very well, and I think that's something that we've got to be open-minded about. So we'll see what happens moving on with the Chiefs. By the way, on that list of players I mentioned from the 2022 draft class, I mentioned Jaylen Watson. And just the other day, and I mentioned this a few times this offseason, I mentioned Jaylen Watson has not played particularly well. I don't think he played as well in his second year compared to his rookie season. And there is a bit of a reason for that. So word came out today that Jaylen Watson played a majority of the season, and this came from Charles Goldman from A to Z Sports, so a fairly reliable source there. Jaylen Watson played a majority of the season with a torn labrum. For those of you that don't know what a labrum is, it essentially helps keep your shoulder joint in place when it tears. You'll essentially feel a lot of pain there and might even experience some instability in the shoulder, almost like it's slipping out of place. The joint, that is. So by the way, I don't know who here is a UFC fan. Tyron Woodley, who's a former Mizzou Tiger, phenomenal wrestler and a great boxer as well. He was the UFC welterweight champion, and he fought a very good jiu-jitsu fighter in Rafael dos Anjos, who was, by the way, one of the best striking coaches, and Jason Perillo. Tyron Woodley tore his labrum in the first round of the fight, and he still found a way to win because of his wrestling, his takedown defense, shutting down all of Rafael dos Anjos' takedowns. Now, Woodley did break the record for fewest punches thrown as a winner in a 5-round fight as a champion, because he tore his labrum in the first round. Whenever I hear torn labrum, I always think of Tyron Woodley and what he did to overcome adversity in that fight. So you can still, play through a torn labrum. It's not really suggested. But sometimes athletes will hide those types of things at the end of the day. Whether you agree or not is a separate topic. But yeah, it sucks hearing that. And by the way, you hear this a lot. I remember D Ford, when he had like a really good, what year was it? He had like a really good 2016 season. And then he took a big step back in 2017, and people wondered why. And then in one of his offseason press conferences leading into 2018, he was like, yeah, I was dealing with some injuries. It's like, okay. You hear this sometime in sports where an athlete doesn't have as good of a season, especially in the NFL. And in the offseason, they'll open up and they'll say, yeah, I was dealing with this injury and that injury. So this is the time of year where you tend to hear about injuries that occurred that you really didn't know about. And by the way, this kind of does beg the question of, what's up with the injury report? How come this was not on there? But topic for another time. Listen, I like Jaylen Watson. I still remember his first big play as a Chief was that 100-yard pick six against the Chargers, the very first game on Prime, if you recall. If Jaylen Watson does not pick that off, I mean, forget about the touchdown going 100 yards from end zone to end zone. If he doesn't pick that off and the Chargers score, the Chargers win that game right there. That's probably enough for them to game, because that ended up being a 3-score game. His interception actually tied the game, if I recall correctly, because the Chargers were at the 1 yard, or not at the 1 yard line, but the ball was thrown right at the end zone, right at the goal line, I should say. And the Chargers were looking to go up by 2 scores, and that was a difference maker right there, and that was a huge story the next day. So I'm really curious to see how Watson does this offseason and going into next season. Hopefully does better. Listen, the Chiefs have a lot of interesting guys at cornerback, because if the Chiefs do trade Sneed, who we've spent a lot of time talking about, there's a chance that they might be willing to be willing to trade Sneed, but they probably feel optimistic about the other young cornerbacks they've got. McDuffie, Watson, Josh Williams, Nazeed Johnson. I keep mentioning this is a guy who the Chiefs feel really good about. Spags had a lot of great things to say about him in training camp. Even after his injury, was saying he was one of the starters on the early depth chart there. So I think the Chiefs feel really good about the group of cornerbacks they have. They drafted 4 of them in 2022. They drafted 3 corners and 2 safeties, but they converted Nazeed Johnson from safety to cornerback. So it should be very interesting to see what the Chiefs do with their cornerbacks going into the draft and into training camp. All right, we got to talk about the Buffalo Bills here because, boy, what a day they had. Have you guys seen the movie The Purge? The Purge in Buffalo today. 100%. The Bills released a shit ton of players today. Boy, this is like, I mean, there are a lot of teams right now that are going to be calling the agents of these players that got released here, because there are a lot of players here who will not have an issue finding a home somewhere. The Buffalo Bills released the following players: quarterback Tre'Davious White, safety Jordan Pryor, center Mitch Morse, former Chief, of course, also a Mizzou Tiger there, wide receiver Deontay Hardy, cornerback Sierra Neal, and running back Naheem Hines. I hope I said that right. They also restructured a couple of contracts. They restructured Von Miller's deal and also Rasul Douglas's deal. They also signed Mitchell Trubisky. Interesting. They were able to re-sign Taylor Rapp, and they also re-signed guard David Edwards to a 2-year deal. The Buffalo Bills entered Wednesday with more than $40 million over the cap. They freed up very close to $44 million in cap space. Now, that's still not much to do anything in free agency, but still better than where they were Wednesday morning. Look, I know a lot of people talk about the salary cap and, hey, you can do things to it. It's not real if you can massage the salary cap. I've heard that term before. Salary cap is real, man. And again, like the Bills, not last offseason, but the offseason before, I still remember everyone talking about how the Bills have had the most talent on paper and that they're so invincible and they're going to go on this big run. I mean, they've had a lot of great players, but they have no Super Bowls to show for it. Like, if this was Kansas City letting go of a bunch of players, it's like, yeah, that would suck, but at least you won 3 Super Bowls in the span of 5 years. Buffalo is trying to revamp their entire team, not because these guys suck, but because they're in a terrible spot with the cap. And I know a lot of people are saying, why isn't Brett Veach paying players? Because he doesn't want to end up in a situation like this. Why is Brett Veach the general manager right now? Because John Dorsey waited too long to extend certain players. He waited too long to give Justin Houston his deal. Waited too long to give Eric Berry his deal. And unfortunately, both Eric Berry and Justin Houston started dealing with injuries right after they signed those deals. And I know those injuries are not a general manager's fault. That's just terrible luck at the end of the day. Like, no GM can see that coming. But when the dominoes just fall like that, where you wait too long to re-sign someone and they get hurt right after those extensions, it's going to be held against you, plain and simple. Fair or not, that's just the way things work in the NFL. You could have a really good draft. You can draft college players who were really good at all these different universities, but if they don't pan out well in the NFL, or if they just get hurt, again, that can be held against you. You can be getting, the most hyped up players in the first round every year, but again, if they don't pan out or they get hurt, those are just things that get held against you. Again, you can talk about how that's maybe not fair, but that's just what we've seen in the past, where if a team is dealing with injuries, the owner is going to look around and say, hey, head coach, GM, you guys did not do your jobs properly. You guys failed. We got to move on and get someone else to make the big decisions for us. Buffalo caught a lot of players, Bob. I'll go over it one more time. Tre'Davious White, Jordan Pryor, Mitch Morse, Deontay Hardy, Sierra Neal, and Naheem Hines, excuse me. A lot of guys on that list. And that freed up more than $40 million. And they also re-signed guys to kind of help with the cap space as well. But man, what a day for the Bills. By the way, do you remember when the Chiefs traded with the Buffalo Bills to trade up number 10 to get Patrick Mahomes? And the Chiefs sent a few draft picks to the Bills. All of those players they drafted are now gone. Tre'Davious White was one of those players. Look, I know the Bills are happy with Josh Allen, and I'm not here to say, what if the Bills drafted Mahomes? The Bills gave Patrick Mahomes to the Chiefs. And by the way, Who has suffered the most? The Buffalo Bills. Mahomes keeps beating the Bills in heartbreaking fashion too. The AFC title game being one game away from the Super Bowl, the 13-second game, which gets brought up in Buffalo, the wide right game. It's like, man, you gave the Chiefs the number 10 pick. You essentially gave the Chiefs Patrick Mahomes, and you're the team paying for it the most. Listen, if Buffalo doesn't give the Chiefs the number 10 pick, Buffalo probably goes to at least one Super Bowl, maybe two. But no, that's just the way things panned out, man. And, you know, you got to live with it. That's a decision. That's a decision you made. And you keep losing to the Chiefs in the playoffs. I know Bills fans love to brag about the regular season record, kind of like Bengals fans, but it's like, okay, how many rings do you have? What postseason success do you have to show for it? Nothing. So shut up. Last thing I want to go over here before I sign out for the night, and I appreciate those of you joining live. I know it's a little late on a Wednesday here. I want to talk about Caitlin Clark for a moment because she shattered the record for most points scored in college basketball history, surpassing good old Pistol Pete. So congratulations to Caitlin Clark, obviously a Chiefs fan, so we're happy for her. Listen, maybe I'm giving people way too much attention for this, but there is, you know, even though it's a small percentage of people, there are still people out there, and even like some podcasters and even a couple analysts on TV who are shitting on Caitlin Clark saying, oh, well, she's in women's college basketball. She had the 3-point line. Pistol Pete didn't. You know what this reminds me of? Remember last year when Patrick Mahomes had the record for most total yards while winning his second MVP? Oh, but Patrick had 17 games. The other guys didn't. Folks, the NFL is moving to an 18-game format very soon. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We just don't know when. I think it's going to be soon, but it is happening. So whatever single season record was broken during the 16-game era is damn sure going to be broken whenever we get 18 games for every NFL team. Listen, people love to take away from another person's success and talk about eras, like especially with Mahomes again. Oh, well, Mahomes is in a pass-heavy era. You know, Troy Aikman wasn't. John Elway wasn't. Well, I'm sorry. You know, I guess it's Patrick's fault. His parents didn't have him sooner. Like, seriously, it's getting to a point now where people are just bitching and moaning about someone's success. How miserable do you have to be as a bottom feeder to see someone succeed and break records and just shit on it? Because here's the problem. Because we're seeing this a lot with Patrick Mahomes right now and Travis Kelce as well. I know. You see them win a lot and people don't like it outside of Kansas City. If we keep doing this to greatness, whenever these players move on and retire, we're going to look back and say, oh, shit, I got a chance to witness an all-time great, but I was too busy being a bottom feeder, a mouth breather, and I was bitching and moaning about their success the entire time. And listen, we're going to have a lot of great athletes over the years, but these top-tier, rare athletes like a Mahomes, like a Kelce, like a Caitlin Clark that we might not ever see again, man, you have two options. You can either enjoy the greatness or you can cry about it like a loser, like a lonely loser. This is what Colin Cowherd was talking about with people who were crying about the whole Taylor Swift thing this season. I don't understand people who see this kind of success for an athlete. Again, you know, we're talking about athletics here. It's not like this is life or death at the end of the day. And they just want to be critical of someone's success. You know how many people out there looked at Mahomes and they're like, oh, Mahomes, he doesn't have a great stat line in his 3 Super Bowls. He needed overtime to get 300 yards. this year's Super Bowl, again, whether your preferred team won it or not, that was a fucking epic game that came down to the wire. And if you came out of that Super Bowl bitching and moaning about Mahomes needing an overtime period to get 300 yards, my God, man, if you cannot enjoy this kind of greatness, I don't know what you can enjoy in life. I really don't. This is what sports are about. Yeah, sure. Again, there are people who have their preferred teams and all that stuff. I get that. But man, if you're just going to sit here and just be this whiny when someone succeeds, I've got nothing for you. Maybe stop watching sports and go get some new hobbies at the end of the day. Because if you're going to take sports this personally and be upset when someone succeeds, sports are not for you. Plain and simple. All right. That'll do it for this episode of the Chief Zone podcast. Back-to-back days of the Chief Zone. By the way, I'm just going to say right now, Red Friday live chat, we do it every single Red Friday at night. I'm not 100% sure if we will do a Red Friday live chat this Red Friday. If we do, it'll be a very early edition. In other words, it'll be in the morning. We may not have as many viewers, which is understandable. So I'm not exactly sure if there will be a Red Friday live chat, and if there will be one, it'll be in the morning. So I'm just letting you know right now, if you guys enjoy the Red Friday live chats and you guys want to tune in for that. Yeah, I see all of you guys. I appreciate all of you who joined us live for this episode of the Chief Zone podcast on Facebook and on YouTube. For those of you who listened on Apple, Spotify, appreciate all of you guys as well. All right, my name is Farzin Vasugian. I am out. Enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.